Hi, my name is Manny. I go by as Manny64 on social media. I'm a new Pokemon VGC player. I know some people are familiar with who I am because I've gone to two regionals recently. And I wanted to actually start a video podcast. I've done a podcast before with my friend, and I never really dabbled into doing video podcasts. I've got a couple of videos here and there, but nothing really too crazy. And I think for me personally, this is just going to be a pilot episode just to get a feel with what podcast would look like as a video podcast. And I wanted the podcast to be around Pokemon, and I enjoy the game. I've played the game for a very long time, and this is actually, as I said, I've just started playing VGC, so this is very new to me in that sense. And I wanted to just go over my experience as a new player and someone who's gone to two regionals, both being Lille and Dansk, and wanted to talk about my experience as someone who's jumped into the game, how I've prepared for it, and how I've developed overall as an individual just from those two tournaments that have come up very recently. And that's why on my screen currently, for those of you unaware, this is Pokemon Showdown, and this is where you get your team building done for the game in Pokemon. It's much easier than making the team on cart, which is on the cartridge on the Switch, and then play testing it like this because you have to make slight adjustments. Pokemon Showdown is the main hub for people making teams, and from there, once you've play tested and played versus other people online on this battle simulator, you then start making your team on the Switch, and then you start playing with people at tournaments, yeah, using the Switch. But no, I just wanted to speak about my own experience, like I said, and coming into the game very new. It's a very daunting thing, something that I wasn't really sure about. I played the game, like I said, years ago, and then playing doubles just feels like a different ball game completely. And I'm quite lucky in that sense. When you come to these different events, you meet people from all different backgrounds, and people are very receptive. People love like talking about the game, and people have a lot of knowledge about the game. And I think that's a big thing for me. I think people have really impacted the way that I've played the game, and for someone who's just jumped into it, I've been quite fortunate to meet some really cool people who've done a lot of favors for me. That's actually helped with my development. So without further ado, like I said, this is a pilot episode. This is my first one, and I want to actually just jump into my experience. Like I mentioned, Lille and Dansk were the two regionals I went to, and with those regionals, you usually need to be very well prepared. And I'm laughing because when I started, I said I was going to go to this regional event. I made a team, and you can see here, like it starts off here. This is my Lille team, and then it's progressively carries on, and then I made very many adjustments, and these teams in between weren't significant. But then my final team was actually this one here, which says Lille final team, and it's one of those things where you usually want a lot more time to prepare, and I had a lot of work, and with work, I was very much stuck doing that up to the very end, so I didn't really play test this team that much. And that had a massive impact on how I performed. And I think, to be honest, having that experience for me was a massive difference, because when you have those experiences where you've not done so well, and you need to work out like why that's the case. For me, preparation was a massive one. And once I realized, okay, I haven't prepared for this appropriately, I'm going to readjust, give myself more time for the next event. It made a massive difference. And if I'm completely honest with you, my record for this event was 2-7. I won my first game. I lost my second game to someone who's a very good friend of mine now, and then I won my third game. And then from there, I just started to like, hit some slump where I went downward momentum by just losing a ton of games in a row, and it does have an impact on your confidence. I don't want to like have dismissed that in a sense. It's very difficult to you lose, and then for your first time, you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I lost. You're thinking about so many different things, and I feel like when you're in your head too much, you start to realize why. You start to realize why you're making mistakes, but because you're overthinking about those mistakes you're making, it makes a massive difference. And there's a lot of things that I wasn't really aware of and didn't think were necessary before coming to my first event. So in Lille, I didn't come with a just a book. And people are like, and I just saw people. I was like, why has everyone got a book on them? Like, what's this? What's this notepad for? And I started realizing that when you play the game, people start taking notes. and I had to grab a book from my friend, and I did take some notes, but I didn't really understand like the notion of why the notes were important, and someone then explained it to me afterwards. And for someone being really new, no one really says that, oh, when you go to a regional, grab a book, grab a piece of paper, bring a pen with you, be prepared for these kind of things. Because for me, it was just, let me just play the game. I've played it online multiple times. Let's see where we go from here. And I think that's a key thing to bring up, where you've got a lot of moving parts where you have things that you need to sign up before the event, have your team ready, and all these things. But having a piece of paper and a pen is actually super important, and it lets you write down necessary information that helps you prepare better during those games that you play, because it's a very grueling day. It's like 9 rounds of Pokemon matches, and they can, for the most part, last an hour. So it's best of three, round one, round two, round three, and it starts at 8:30 in the morning. And we wake up that early, obviously, when we want to be well rested, but you need to also be able to get your brain moving and thinking. And sometimes when you're not making any notes, it's quite difficult to be like, okay, what happened in the first game? How am I going to adjust for that? And that's why the booklet and just having something that you can take notes in is just super important. So I'd highly recommend getting a piece of paper when you go to these events. But that's something that was a pitfall of mine when I first started, and it's something that I was very much prepared for the second time round. And I do want to actually jump into the team itself. The team I went with for the little regional was a Landorus, an Iron Hands, a Sinistra, a Chiyu, a Tornadus, and a Fluttermane. And you can see like some of these. So they're called spreads, which are just points, effort values, which are put into a Pokemon so they can reach certain speeds. And in this example, this Landorus has a speed of 143. If you didn't give it anything, it would be 111. And I think getting into the game is very, I don't want to call it intimidating, but you're not super aware of certain things, that why they make such a massive difference. And I'm just going to talk in this podcast from the perspective of someone who's got the knowledge of the game, has reached that point where they've gone to their first event, they've done some level of putting effort values into their Pokemon, and then from there you've been able to create a team. And this is what happened to me, where you look at your team and you're going to an event and you're like, what do I do? What shall I do? And I think that was something for me that was a big deal, where I knew what Pokemon I was familiar with, but I didn't really know like what I needed to play. And that's kind of where I'm going to jump to a couple places where I used VGC Pace. This is a resource, and I will link this in the description and in the podcast, in Spotify description as well, or whatever podcasting platform I use, where you can find different teams, and you can find, like here it's a paste, and in this paste you can see that there's a given team that you can use, and it has a set of 6, which for some reason I can't seem to see why that's not loading in. But yeah, you have a set of 6 Pokemon, and it just tells you what Pokemon they are, and that's a really good resource to find out, like, if there's a given team where you use a team and you're like, okay, this is really cool, I might use this for my tournament. If you're not super familiar with the game and you just want to get going very quickly, that's something that you could use, and then you can take the EV spreads from these teams. And in some cases, so on VGC Pace, it says here quite clearly, no EVs, no EVs, and then some of them say yes. And so if you click on this team, for example, they will have the necessary spreads for you to use. And it's all maths. People, I think Pokemon is just a game of maths. It's all based on variance and so many different factors, which I will jump into as well later in this episode, about what's the significance of these numbers. But I think when you're first starting out and you just want to play the game and you want to get familiar with it, definitely jump on a website like VGC Pace, because if you copy this link above, you can then go to the top of this, you click on new team on Pokemon Showdown, and you then import the team here, press on save, and then you can clearly see that this team with all those numbers that you saw earlier has been put into this battle simulator effectively, and then you can use it. and you can just play where you go press onto VGC, and in our case the rule set is Regulation E, and then the Pokemon team was called Beast Coast in this example, and you just press battle and you find people to play with. And I think that's the great thing about how easy it is to use this platform to start playing, and I'd highly recommend, if you're really interested, to just jump straight in and play the game, just use Showdown. And like I said in the beginning, this record for this event was 2-7, which isn't great. It's 2 wins and 7 losses. If you want to get remotely close to getting championship points, which is just a point system that's used to be able to be accumulated to get to, I believe it's 400 for European players to be able to participate in the World Championships. So every event that happens is either a local, a regional, and then there's an international challenge, which is usually in London. I think this year there was one in Latin America, which is Sao Paulo, and just different locations around different continents. And then you have the World Championships, which is one location where all those players that have reached a certain threshold of championship points, which varies per region, get to participate in. And ultimately, I think that's something that we need to address as well, in the sense of having objectives, playing the game. And for someone like myself, I've started playing, and it's become more clear to me that if you don't really have an objective, it's very difficult for you to not only progress, but also be able to truly enjoy something. I feel like when you can play the game and enjoy it, that's one part of it. But like if you don't have like an objective, right, even if it's something so small, like from Lille, I went 2-7, and I was like, Dansk, I'm just gonna get 3 wins. If I can get 3 wins, that is progression, and progression's the first step to becoming better. I was like, look, 3 wins, that's a success for me, in my opinion. And obviously, I can talk about how I actually performed, because I did perform better than 3 wins, and that came from those different elements of practicing, using these different resources, which I want to jump into as well, to be able, and speaking to friends and people around just to give you advice, because I've only, like I said, it's only been my career, my Pokemon career is just starting, and it's a very complicated game if for someone who's probably just starting out. And I know I've spoken to friends about trying to play the game, and me explaining the game to them is very difficult to articulate, because there's certain things I can kind of articulate and justify, but it feels like schoolwork. It's like a lecture. I remember sitting down with my friend, and I spoke to him for like an hour and a half about the game, and it's like I can't retain all this information. So if there are people that you think would be really interested in jumping in the game, or certain people that you want to get involved in the game, I think when it comes to anything in life, you don't want to convince someone. I feel like you give them the resources to build upon what they need to build on, and then from there you might see them decide to grow that kind of passion and understanding for the game, and they might hop on the same journey as you. They might be like, okay, I've tried it and I've not really enjoyed it too much, but obviously I'm here today as someone who's jumped on that journey and has taken that next step to be able to be better and meet cool people along the way. I think meeting people has been super important to me. I'm quite lucky that I have some good memory of Spanish GCSE, and I think that's really been quite useful, just to talk to people from Spain as well, and just people from different countries. Most people speak English, but it's quite nice to be able to communicate with people in their own language. I've always kind of enjoyed that as someone who travels as well in that sense. So it's been really great to be able to meet people, and you speak to them and you discuss the game, and when you start discussing the game, you just become better, because there's certain things that you might see but other people see better than you. And that's why I never underestimate the power of meeting people and having a network just playing this game, because I think watching the game might be the first place to start. I've obviously jumped into here's the battle simulator and things like this, but this is, at the moment, there's actually a regional going on today, and it might have just wrapped up, was coming to the final right now, and it's in Stuttgart. It was in Stuttgart this weekend. This is a European circuit, which is just I because I live in Europe, it's around the teams and events that are happening in Europe. This is the one about Stuttgart, And the great thing about that is you can see people's teams here. We obviously mentioned VGC Pace. I'm covering the person's team, so I will jump off the screen for a second. But you can see this is Sergio Ramirez. This is his team that he's using. And it's just, you can take a look at it and you can be like, oh, this is a standard team. And I'm pretty sure, because it's day 2, indefinitely this person is in top 32, just based on the time that I've jumped into this video as well. It's probably close to the latter stages of the tournament. And you can take a look at people's teams by just looking at what's happening on the actual streams and watching people play. And I think this is a place where you can educate yourself and not only what's super useful in this current moment in time, because that can obviously change over time as the meta develops and as new events come around. But it's a great resource just to see what the game's about. And if it's super daunting to take a look at a screen like this, and you're like, okay, I have no real understanding of the game. The stat stuff, I can get that sorted out by putting a team on. I think it's a great place just to watch someone play, get an understanding of what doubles is like, why do people do certain things, and you kind of build that awareness around the game. So that's something that I did. I've spoken to a lot of people, especially at these events, and I'm like, so how do you jump in? A lot of people mentioned during that time where the world was just in a difficult place and people had a lot of free time, so they were jumping on playing games. And I was one of those people. I actually did not play Pokemon. I was playing FIFA. So I was playing a lot of FIFA back then, to be fair. But that's when people jumped into the game and had a really big go of like, this is what the game's about. Let me understand it. Let me go into it. And I think now more than ever, it's been a great time to jump into the game, because before you wouldn't even know what other teams were using. So where it says here, U-turn, Rock Slide, Stomping Tantrum, Terra Blast, I actually might have a team sheet on me right here actually. These are, so you get this sheet of paper. Let's see if this is going to focus. I really hope it does. I don't think it will. But anyway, if you got to trust me on this one. This piece of paper, it has the person's team on it. So this person was using Salamence, and it tells you it's Terra type, flying in this case, ability which is Intimidate, Life Orb is his item, and then it has 4 moves: Hurricane, Tailwind, Protect, Draco Meteor. Perfect. I know someone's team. Before, when you used to play Pokemon, you wouldn't know the other person's team, so there's like an infinite possible like ways of playing a Pokemon, and you wouldn't know how to react. So in this example, Landorus on the screen has a Choice Scarf, which means that you know that if I use the Rock Slide, I have to use Rock Slide or I'm swapping out. But back in the day, if I use Rock Slide, the only way you'd work out that I had a certain item is based off those notes I mentioned about how if this Pokemon was supposed to be slower than another Pokemon, then you know that it's probably got an item or it's got something that it's holding that's made itself faster. And there's lots of inferences. But I feel like nowadays, because the teams, and it's called Open Team Sheet, the teams are readily available, you can actually, you're spending less time inferring and more time strategizing and understanding what the opponent might do. And I think that barrier to entry, because it's lowered a lot now, it's much easier to jump into the game, and it's a really great time to jump in. So if you are interested, I'd really recommend just giving it a dabble and see what's going on. So and also I do want to apologize. I have been a bit all over the place with this first episode, but I just want to get a feel for it. Like I said, pilot one, just to give it a go. And if you guys enjoy that kind of thing and like me just chatting about the game, I'm happy to continue and even get guests on as well. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well also. So going back to it, this is the team that I've ran with Lil. 2 and 7, very much Pokemon that are very used. Tornadus is used a lot. Iron Hands is used a lot, especially the Assault Vest variant. Landorus is used a lot. Fluttermane is used a lot. Sinistcha, not used too much. I'm obviously recording this after certain tournaments, so I know someone in the UK, shout out Tom, used the Sinistcha, which is quite cool. I was quite happy to see that in the top 4 as well of Dansk, which is really interesting. And then Chiyu, which is used quite a lot. And I know a lot of people are probably looking at me tapping away on the screen and looking at this team, and they're like, there's some pitfalls and there's some big ones here, if I'm honest with you. And I'm smiling because the great thing about it is that you learn from this. And one example is right here, right now. Someone said to me when I remember going to this event, and that so you've got a life orb, but you're not running protect. And protect is probably the most important move in VGC because it lets you position yourself so much better when playing doubles because it lets you mitigates damage from one Pokemon and it allows you to either attack with another one or prevent certain things from happening. Like it keeps you on the field for one extra turn. That's a massive difference, especially in how this format is in doubles as well. Because you take 6 with you, you take 6 with you, but then you only bring 4 to the actual game that you're going to. So you have a team of 6, you bring 4, and then you do a best of 3. And you can switch up what 4 you bring every time. And that's just something to be aware of, where it's like if someone looks at your team and they've got that piece of paper and they say, oh, there's no protect on this Pokemon, that's a free hit. Someone's just hitting that side of this Pokemon and hitting that slot constantly, knowing you can do nothing about it. And this is when the element of just meeting people. And I remember speaking to someone and they're like, look, you have this item, but you're not utilizing it properly because you don't have protect. But for me, when I first started, I was like, I don't feel like I needed it. And they were like, so if you didn't need it, you should have used a different item instead. And these small oversights, it doesn't feel like a big deal in that moment in time. But when you make those adjustments and then play again, you start realizing that damage difference or that difference in that item plays a massive impact or role in how you play the game. And I was actually talking to someone about the game in the regional, and I said something quite interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, those of you listening, in that sense of there's one thing knowing how to play the game and knowing what your opponent will do, but there's another thing of like understanding why you're making a decision. Like you might know you need to do this one thing, but why are you doing that? And I think asking yourself why and being more focused around the understanding of your decision making, that will just make you a better player. Because you don't just decide, I have to click a few buttons or I have to do this, or this is the way that something has always played out, so I have to do this way. You're more conscious about your decision making, and that overall makes you more aware of the options that your opponent has. Why is that so significant? I think it's very significant because of the fact that when you play the game, there's the element of you know what you want to do. It's like a mind game. I know what you know that I know what I want to do, but to beat that, it would have to be one of those things where it's I know you know, until it's just like a infinite back and forth between someone. And I feel like if you have a better understanding of this person thinks I will do X because of Y, why not change up a certain decision based on previous habits I've done or previous habits the other person has exhibited? And I know that sounds like very confusing, but I feel like that's why I recommend watching the games. And actually this is off the back of some advice that someone else gave me. They said watch the games. They said this is what they do and they're very good at the game. I want to give them a little shout out. They probably know who they are, and if they're listening to this, I really appreciate you as well for a lot you've done for me. They said I watch games and I make notes of those teams. So if you just go back to what that clip earlier, they take a look at this team, they write down the team. They write down the team, the item. They're obviously not aware of those effort values that we mentioned, but they're very aware of what the team is and what the opponent was doing. And in our case, if I can pull that up, the opponent's team is... One second. There it is. The opponent's team is this. They then actually go into the scenario like this where they watch it. So this was turn 1. And in turn 1, they're like, okay, let's pretend I'm in the shoes of Sergio, and I've started the game with Chien-Pao and Rillaboom. How would I respond to a Tornadus and Urshifu based off the information I've been provided, which you've made a note of? And I think that is the most important thing. And by participating in an exercise like this, yes, you're not using your own team. Yes, you're not using a battle simulator. You're not going through the motions of playing the game. But I think taking that step back and just looking at the game and watching it and understanding that this is what I would do, that kind of forces you to start building in that logic and putting the reps in to start building out that knowledge base of this is how I would do something, and now when I go into my own games, this is how I'm going to apply it. And that is effectively what I did going into my next regional. Let me just put that back on. To my next regional. And don't get me wrong, this team was very good. I definitely could have played it better. And there was most of the games actually went to game 3 if I remember correctly. So it was one of those ones where I'd win the first game. I call myself Manny wins first game person. Well, I forgot. I had a nickname, or like game 1 merchant, because game 1 I would just win. I'd always win game 1, and then all of a sudden I would really struggle with adjusting. And at the end of that, ultimately, because I lost, that means I lost the set. So I'd win game 1 and then lose the game 2 and 3. Whenever I lost game 1, I ended up winning. So it was really weird. And obviously for your first tournament, you want to do well. You're really amped up for it. And I brought a friend with me for a bit of moral support. And it helped for the first 3 rounds. And then it just kind of went downhill. But I still think it's important to address these kind of things, because you can always improve at something. I think for me, I'm massively into personal development. And I love the notion of like you can build upon your skill set and become better. And I definitely did that in my next event that I went to, which was in Poland. And you can see that the team here has a Landorus, Ironhand, Sinistcha, Chiyu, Tornadus, and Fluttermane. And I'm actually going to jump to scroll up a little bit, and we can see here, just in the difference of copy of dance, copy of dance, copy of dance. So there's so many different teams, and then obviously some of these ones that come out from Lille. But if I carry on going up, there are a lot of teams that I've made, and the final version of the team that I had was this for the regional in Poland. Completely different. The only Pokemon that stayed on this team was a Landorus, and it was the exact same set. But everything else, completely different idea, completely different style of play. Because I decided, and this is something that was big for me, was the team I used previously was sourced from different people, different resources, using things like Pikalytics to see Pokemon that were most used. This is a very good resource to see the percentage of usage for certain Pokemon. And if I just jump off, you can actually see the spreads of those Pokemon. So HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, speed. That's the order it's always in. And you can see that most items used percentage wise, most moves used percentage wise, and even teammates, and it tells you a ranking. And obviously you have the difference of the Switch, your usage on the Switch versus the usage on Showdown, which is a bit more specific, because on the Switch you don't know what type of Ogerpon you're playing with. In this case, Wellspring is in the top 4 and then Half Flame, but on the Switch version it's Ogerpon is just second. And I feel like it's a good basis to be able to take note of what's going on and then look at what your team can do to stop these things, because these things are the most common, and then you build from that. And you can see that Landorus is in the top 3. The team that I had before had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Pokemon in the top, let's just say 15 in this case. 6 of the top 15 Pokemon were in my team, and I performed with a 207. And that comes with experience, that comes with a lot of factors that come into that. But then this time around, I thought to myself, you can play with the best Pokemon, but if you don't know how to use them, it's effectively, you're not bringing out the best in how to play. Like, you're not bringing out your best, basically. I thought to myself, using other people's sets, that's a great idea. Something that you can get going, get started. And then I decided, you know what? For this tournament, I had a lot more that were their time, a lot more time to practice. And funny enough, this team was actually created. Despite making my whole team, I made a different team on Sunday. So this is a week before the event. On Sunday, I made a completely different team, and then I've like gone to bed. I've played online. I've got absolutely smoked and beaten so badly. Tuesday comes around, and the event's starting on Saturday morning. I was like, I have to make a new team. Have to make a new team. So those adjustments were, I don't have enough time to actually like probably get these Pokemon. So what I'm gonna do? Quite lucky in the sense that, going back to the whole friends thing, one of my friends plays Pokemon, doesn't play competitively, but had all the vitamins and all these items that help facilitate the process of building a Pokemon. Helped me source like 2 of my Pokemon. I had some battle ready Pokemon, in this case the Landorus and the Moongus were already done. The Heatran was basically halfway there because I had like a set that was very similar. So then my friend ended up being the Indeedee and Grimmsnarl, and then I did the Regidrago. And it worked out. I got it in time. I played with the team, and to be honest, I barely practiced with the team too much. Like I understood fundamentally that, look, the team is meant to be played in a certain way, and you can see here a very unique and different type of Regidrago set. A lot of people using Choice Scarf and Dragon Fang, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna use Focus Energy and Scope Lens. I cannot explain to you how proud I am of this creation of mine. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if I'd recommend it to people. It's really funny. After the tournament, I was like, okay, this is amazing. Before the tournament, I was like, it seems a bit odd. We haven't seen this very much. It's not very common at all. But let's just run with it. And because it's a Pokemon I wanted to use, I think that's the important thing. I started off with choosing a Pokemon I wanted to use, how I was going to use it, and how is that going to be facilitated. I think those are the 3 questions. What Pokemon do you want to use, like a favorite Pokemon? And I have to be honest, it's a Pokemon I like, but I'm also aware of the fact that it is a very good Pokemon. It's not like, for example, I like a. I'm just trying to think of a Pokemon that I like, but it's not. I like a Dash Bun or Dax Bun, but like I wouldn't probably use it because right now in the current meta, it probably wouldn't fare up too well. People can make it work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those people. I'm not so good at the game yet where I can make these things work. But for the most part, for someone who's just jumping in, it's a good Pokemon. It's something I like out of the Pokemon that I've seen on that list back on Pikalytics. And I scroll down like, okay, if I'm looking at Pokemon, I'm scrolling down. Yeah, you can imagine how far down I had to probably scroll. Probably jumped past it. But it's just, yeah. So scroll down quite a fair bit, to be fair, to get there. To get to, if you can see on the tab, it's quite low down. And it's just a Pokemon that I enjoy. And like, there's another Pokemon, like, for example, Salamence is a Pokemon I like a lot. And I've actually been fortunate enough, and shout out to the guys in Poke Esports for taking team recommendations. I actually had a video of my team on their channel about Salamence, and this was really just prior to Salamence getting really popular, and I was quite proud of that. Like, I decided to choose a Pokemon I liked. I knew that was relatively good, and I just thought to myself, look, for some reason I was like, you know what, Salamence, not a lot of people using it because Dragonite is in high usage and quite high up, and it's the main dragon type being used. So is Roaring Moon. You can see here these 2 dragon types are dominating like the top 20, and that Salamence has got a very good ability in Intimidate, and it's just a Pokemon I like. It just looks really cool. I quite like it. And then from there, I made a team that was showcased on their channel. So shout out to the boys on the channel. Really appreciate them taking the suggestions, and they've done it for a lot of people, and that's another great resource. Watching people's channels and seeing what other people submit just to get for a feel for a team. I think that the code for that team is actually still available, if I remember correctly, and I can even show you the team on Showdown right now. But going back to it, for Dansk, this was the team I decided to use. And I was like, it's something that I understood fundamentally. I need to set up a bunch of screens. So Grimstorm was on team to mitigate damage. I set up one focus energy, and then we Draco Meteor, and we see what happens. And if there's a fairy type, we better save that Terra type, because Terra Steel, Terra Blast with a critical hit does a lot of damage. And a critical hit Draco Meteor, yes, I've only got 8 PP, so I can use it 8 times, and it does have a 10% chance to miss. I'm running my chances. And there's something that you need to accept as well. I think in the game, a lot of people get very frustrated where they miss moves. There was a game in Poland, and shout out to the person I was playing with. They had a really unique and cool team. It had a Frigoraph, it had a Clefairy, it had a Blood Moon Ursaluna. Or regular Ursaluna, actually. I missed a Draco Meteor in my first game, and I'm not going to tell you that lost me the game, because that wasn't necessarily true, because they played very well. But I thought to myself, you know what? I missed it. It's on me. I signed up for a move that has a 10% less accuracy than 100%, so there's a likelihood of it happening. Going back to the whole maths conversation, cool, it happened. Next game happened. I think I won game 2. I mean, in the order of I won game 1 or I won game 2, and then it went to game 3. So long story short is I've missed a Draco Meteor in game 1. I've also then missed it in game 2. Hilarious, isn't it? But in game 3, turn 1, this is ridiculous. I landed Draco, and I landed crit without a focus energy. And I thought to myself, you know what, the game's the game, and that's something that needs to be accepted in that sense, where you're going to miss things with moves that aren't super accurate, but there's also going to be that good luck and that karma that comes back. For every time you miss, you might get a crit, and odds on, game 3 I landed crit on his Farigiraf, which resulted in basically me winning the game, because they definitely used Trick Room, and I was not going to beat that Trick Room team. Because I remember when he set up Trick Room game 1, absolutely obliterated me. I was like, okay, I tried to play around it, I tried my best, I took some notes down, I was like, okay, I'm a bit more prepared. But in my head I was like, we're dropping a Draco, and we're hoping for the best. And fortunately for me, I landed a crit. So, and that's the game. And that's the great thing about the game. You're going to miss something, you might crit something, and there's so many different variables and factors that contribute to winning and losing. There is going to be variance, but you account for these things, and I think that's the important thing. Another example, Rockside has a 90% chance of missing. You signed up for that, so you have to be willing to accept the fact that, okay, there's a 10, in 9 out of 10 times they're going to land this, so if I do miss it, cool. If I miss it and miss it again, yes, the percentage of that happening is very unlikely. It's like 0.1 squared because they're independent. So it's like a 1% chance actually of that happening. But point is, it still could happen. And it might be one of those times it will happen. And I think mentality might be another podcast episode in itself. But I enjoyed making this team because it felt like something true to me and something that I wanted to create. I took certain sets from certain teams. The Amunga set, and actually a really good resource that I use to do all these calculations. This is called Nerd of Now, the Nimbasa City Post VGC 2024 Scarlet Violet Damage Calculator. So if I go, I should have my setting here. If you scroll to the bottom here, it says my custom set. So if I just go back to my team here, and I just quickly grab, if I just do import, copy and paste, we jump on here, and let me just delete all my custom sets. So that's deleted, and then I just do that and save. If I search a Pokemon, so that team had a Landorus, and it says my custom set. So anything you put here for your spread name will be your custom set. So you can check how much damage you do. So for example, Fluttermane, bulky speed booster versus my Landorus. If I just terrestrialize Terra Blast, I don't kill this Fluttermane. And all these calculations are very important. When you go to tournaments, you can't account for every single type of Pokemon that has these kind of sets, but there's something that you're aware of where it's like, okay, they've got this Pokemon, can I kill it? Or can I, rephrase, can I take it out? If that's the case, you then decide that, okay, there is, in this case, I didn't take it out. But you might verse someone in an event, and you're like, okay, with that damage, I've taken out the Fluttermane, which means, in theory, they're not running this set. And this is a great place also to just identify where there's a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's four. There's four different sets that have been put into this damage calculator as common sets, let's just say. And you can kind of 25% chance of guessing which one it might be. But if we know we're knocking out the Fluttermane, you might think to yourself, cool, they might be running. And obviously, if you know their item based off the piece of paper, you're going to know that it's a sash anyway. But with certain items, you might realize that, oh, okay, they have a Fluttermane, and they have another example, this one. They have a bulky, this is a bulky special attack. The other one was bulky speed. But then you might run your run the chance of using this move, and you can see quite clearly here, and I'll highlight this, 75% chance to KO with Terra Blast. So you kind of have an understanding of what your opponent's using and what type of Pokemon set that they're running, and you make that note, and then for the next game you know that if there's a situation where my Landorus is versing the Fluttermane and the Fluttermane has less than 96.4% health, super specific I know, but if it does have less than that, you will be able to take it out. And something that's quite notable here is also you have an identification of all the statistics. So here I've highlighted it says 181. Here I've highlighted it here and it says 214. If you looked back at Showdown, it showed 143. So if I go back and look at this, you'll see quite clearly here 143. But because of the Choice Scarf, which is an item that 1.5 times your speed, but only lets you choose one move, if we jump back to this, you can see that that calculation has been adjusted for, and 214 is now present. And as a result, you know that if there is no other way of stopping you from being slowed down, you will outspeed the Fluttermane, which in turn means that whenever there's a scenario where the Fluttermane's on the field less than, like I said, 96%, and it's not got any way of increasing its speed, you will then be able to knock it out with Terra Blast with a 75% chance, well, 100% in that case, but if it was full health, 75% chance. And I run my chances, and that's just part of the game. You play to mitigate the amount of damage taken, and you aim to optimize the amount of damage given out. Because the aim in the game is to take out all full Pokemon. Obviously, we're all aware of this. But the great thing about this calculator is this is where I created the very special Regidrago set. So quite clearly here for this Pokemon, you can see that a Moonblast has a 93.8% chance of OHKOing me with this set. And because obviously fairy types are a fairy ghost type is not is immune to normal type moves and dragon type moves, I do 0%. So you can see quite clearly here, I don't actually take out the Fluttermane, but with my set, the Moonblast now does 23%. And this goes back to how you want to facilitate the people and Pokemon around in your team. So I thought to myself, okay, this Regidrago is got 200 base HP. We can either increase the speed and just let it take things out just based off speed and set up Tailwind, or I thought to myself, we can put screens around it and help it by feeding it in, positioning it well where it can just take out Pokemon. So I'm going to click on the button here which says critical hit, and it's now been highlighted. The crit has an 81.3% chance, to OHKO this Fluttermane now. And after 2 turns, it's a guaranteed OHKO basically, because it's doing 96 and then obviously you could just take it out. But this is why I use this Pokemon. I thought to myself, I want to use a Regidrago. I am going to set up a light screen on top of that, so it's doing even less damage. And I thought this is the way I wanted to play the game. And it did a world of good. And there's certain Pokemon that you want to look out for. So for example, Iron Hands, a Drain Punch does 87% because I Terrestrialize. If I do not, the max I'm taking is 43%. If I go to critical hit, it's a guaranteed 2-hit KO because the critical hit with the scope lens is also guaranteed. So as a result, I'm basically going to take it out in 2 hits, and it's never going to be able to take me out. It's a 3-hit KO because it is 43%. And this is another place where I use this a lot. I use this calculator like so much to be able to help me build out my team. And I think that's kind of where I went into finding out about this Regidrago set, which if anyone's interested and wants to know like why I did this, I'm happy to go over in a different episode, potentially just going over the team as an overview of decision and design choices. And with this team in the regional for Dansk, I finished 4-5. I didn't do particularly well at the start, if I'm honest with you. In fact, I was worse than I was in Lille. In Lille, I was 2-1. In this event, I was 0-3. And I had to claw it back, which is probably a little bit more difficult, to be honest. But I trusted in what the team was aiming to do and the overall idea. I think when you have an idea or you have the fundamental principles around what your team wants to do, awesome. You can get going, make the team in accordance to what those principles are, and you can, from there, you're off to the races and you can just work out. You play test, you play test, you play test, you make adjustments. You play test, you play test, you play test, you make adjustments. It's just like a sport. Like, for example, football. You see someone, you cut in, you score. It works once. You cut in again, the defender's adjusted, he's sidestepped you. Cool. You can't cut in anymore. You have to move on the outside. And I think it's like chess. You have to make these adjustments constantly. And it's also contingent on you've done this 5 times. Odds on you are definitely doing it a 6th time. So your opponent will adjust accordingly to this as well. And it's quite, like I said, it's quite good. Playing Pokemon, especially now, is probably, the barrier to entry has probably been I don't want to say the easiest it's been, but the barrier to entry is much lower, and also there's more people involved. There's more content online and resources, and people have created things like I would love to. And there's this last website to really wrap this first episode up is actually LabMouse. And I'd love to get the chance to speak to someone who developed this. I'm from a computer science background, so when I see this kind of data and seeing the format of the website and how well it's done, like I would love to have a conversation with them, because it gives you everything. It's got like a running usage average usage stats score of the Pokemon from different events. So it just takes events, online events, in-person events, and then it gives you a standings. And then it gives you the overall standings for this Pokemon. And then abilities, and then Terra types, then items, and then teammates. And I think this is a great way as well. Also, if you're looking for a Pokemon, so like I mentioned, I wanted to use Salamence. I might go into this website, click on Salamence. Click on Salamence. Shows you the usage, and you can see that it rose up very much so very quickly, dipped, rose up and again, and then you can see the standings for this Pokemon and the abilities. You can see that some people were running Moxie, and then it obviously tapered off very quickly because Intimidate's probably the more superior one in the current moment in time. And you can also see the usage of different Terra types. Poison obviously being used quite a lot. Steel was used a lot, and then it obviously tapered off and went down. And it's just a good overview of current trends, because ultimately that's what the game's about. The game's about having your team be able to, in most cases, because you're going to be versing a ton of people. You're going to be versing people that are using teams that have just been taken from someone else's team that did really well in a tournament and just reusing it. And that's another great way to learn. I think the great thing about the game is we have so much accessibility to different teams because of these different resources that it's really okay to just try something that someone's used and see how well you can perform with it. That's an effective way to understand someone's perspective and logic on how their team was played. So for me, when my first team in Lille, I took some elements from a team that I've seen that does really well, Pokemon that have done really well. But when I played with that, I understood that I didn't clearly have an understanding of the principles around the team. So for me, I thought I'm going to spend more time making my own team, because one, I prefer to do it myself and just enjoy building out a team and going through that whole process. Because if I want to take my ability to the next level, I think team building is one aspect of it, and two is also having understanding of the Pokemon that you've created and reasons why puts you in such a better position to when you're making notes, back to notes, when you make notes, because then you're like, okay, this is what I already know. So in my head, I'm like, if I go back to the team really quickly, in my head, I'm like, this, and this is not actually supposed to be fairy, that was grass. This Terra Blast grass kills an Urshifu. And it probably would without this investment, but it kills an Urshifu. I know I can live a certain attack and I can retaliate and things like this, but I understand these calcs because I made the Pokemon. And to be completely honest with you, this is not an optimal Pokemon spread. I know a lot of people probably looking at this and like, this doesn't make sense and probably needs to change and readjusted, but I think that's part of the learning experience and probably how I'll start to develop as an individual, going to different events and going to different tournaments and communicate with people. And off the back of just this podcast and releasing it, having that awareness of what the game's about, what changes I should make, why I lost, and what people think about my team is one step closer to that overall objective that I think is the first thing you probably need to. I mentioned like 5 different things as your first things, but the main thing is what's the objective. If you want to have fun, that's one aspect of it. You could just take someone's team, have a bit of fun, come to an event. Event's really always a good time as well. Meet people from all different parts of the world, which is crazy as well, which is crazy to see that people come together for this game, which is, I love it. I love meeting people from different parts of the world and enjoying that atmosphere. That's one aspect of it. There's obviously the second aspect, and there's a group of people where you obviously just started, you're trying to develop and grow and understand how to get better at the game. I feel like I'm in this area at the moment. And then there's the next level where it's like, okay, we're competing here, we're playing for keeps, and yes, we want to grow and develop, but we are going to like play it and grind it out. And I think there'll be a point where you start transitioning there as well, from part 2 where I am at the moment, where I'm like flirting with the idea of like, okay, do I do this whole circuit, do I wait till next year? But it comes with practice, and I think the main message I want to get is there's many things I've mentioned today as someone who's just started, and it sounds like a lot, and I probably will need to distill these concepts into a more coherent podcast episode. But I wanted to just go over like, look, yeah, I've just started the game. I didn't do well in my first regional, but that's okay. And I didn't think to myself, and for me, I was like, look, I want to get better at the game. I do want to compete and do well and play in day 2, like the people that we saw in that video earlier today on the Stuttgart event. But with that, there's consequences to the actions that you partake in, and one of them was for me and it starts from the very beginning, not having time to look at your team and understanding what your team is, not being well prepared, bringing a piece of paper, bringing a pen, and luckily someone gave me a pen actually at the event. That was hilarious, so shout out to them as well. Same person who's helped me with team building. And also discussing your ideas with people. I can't stress enough, this was my team for the Dansk regional, and just to give you a little insight to how I finished, I went 4 and 5 like I already said. There was a mid-season showdown, so I think for this event I finished 215th. I don't know how many people participated, I can't remember. I did not finish high, I finished 215th. I went to this event, I had this team, and then I spoke to people after the event, went for dinner, chilled with them, had a good time, had a bit of a laugh, and then I said, look, there's something slightly wrong with this team, what should I do? And I gave them my team sheet. I said, what should I do? They come back to me and they say, this is what you need to do, this is the reason why. Cool. And then I made that adjustment. So if I go really quickly to, where is it? Dansk MSS, you can now see that in this team there is no a Moongus, but there is now an Ogerpon. And it is EV'd a certain way. It's got, obviously it's a grass water type, it's EV'd a certain way to outspeed Urshifu, outspeed Chiyu in this case. It has redirection, and I finished 23rd in this MSS. I went 5 and 3. I lost to 2 people that finished in the top 8. And I lost to one individual that played very well. They outplayed me, And it was just by virtue of I just didn't expect what they did to happen, and it did, and it just resulted in 2 Pokemon being taken off the board in like one turn. So, and that's just part of the game. And I ended up winning 5 games. I finished 23rd. I was the third best. I love this stat. I'm gonna rinse this stat, by the way. I was the because my mates that were with me, they probably would have finished higher than me. I think I was like the third best like UK player, and I think that in itself was just something that wasn't part of the objectives per se, but it's still part of the overall goal of improving and growing, and that's in my second event. So we don't know what will happen in my next event I go to, and I want to stress that like you don't know how your next event's going to go, so don't judge your actions and your performances of one event and be like, okay, because I could have easily said to myself, look, I don't want to carry on. This is it. It's too difficult. It's all these things. But if you're really interested, really want to get into it, I'd recommend all the resources that I showed today. This is obviously Pokemon Showdown. It lets you build your team. We then have the damage calculator. And then if we just jump back into Landmouse and the VGC pace and also Pikalytics, these are great resources to use. And I don't want to overwhelm people with information, because information it's a lot to take in, and it's not easy, and there's much better videos about explaining certain specifics around the game. But I kind of wanted to do this video podcast just to explain like what I did, speak about my team a bit, the impacts of my overall development, and overall like just what the game is about and what it's been for me. And it's been an enjoyable experience, and I hope people can take heed in what I've said and move forward, and also take those steps and those actionable steps to just making yourself a little bit better. Like, and the next goal for me now, it went from 2-7 to 4-5 to let's try and finish 5-4. But maybe next time I don't, and that's fine, because there's always going to be people adjusting along the way as you. I'm going to get better, so are other people. People will have the same mindset as me. So I might verse someone that's on the same journey as me, and they might be like, oh, you know what, I was 4-5 in Stuttgart this weekend. Next event comes on, I'm going to try and go positive. I'm going to make these differences. I'm going to make these changes. And that is fine. But as long as you have that mentality and mindset of like, I'm just going to carry on, or I'm just going to sit down and understand why. And it's always asking why. It always comes back to why. Why am I doing this? What's your vision and what's your purpose? That's one part of it. Why did I make this adjustment on my Pokemon team? That's one aspect of it. But the question why is so powerful. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I've not played the game since the regional. I think I've just touched the game to get to Master Rank on the Switch, and that's it. Because there's a new regulation, new format coming out in January, and the new rule set actually drops on Christmas Day, so that's a Christmas gift from Nintendo. From Game Freak. We love that. But the point is that it's okay to take a break as well. I've taken a break. I'm interested with the idea of making a team around Salamence. I think that's in my head. That's what I want to do. I do have a team on my showdown that's around Salamence, but I also understand that the game is going to be readjusting. And with that, there's going to be new ideas, new things coming through, new things being tested and changed. And that's why I love the game. And I hope my love for the game and what I explained in today's episode is very clear. I really enjoyed this. It's something, obviously, I say somehow, I know I'm that type of guy. I can go on for a little while. So I'm looking at my OBS right now, and I've got myself down to an hour. Just under an hour, like 59 minutes. So I'm going to wrap it up here. If you did enjoy, feel free to share this with someone. Feel free to also give me feedback. I think because there's a pilot episode, would love to hear your thoughts on how it went. If you rather it was a bit more coherent, a bit more structured, a bit more organized, happy to listen to that feedback and make those adjustments. This is something that I just recorded off the cuff. I was like, look, I wanted to do this. I want to start something. I want to give my insight. I think it's valuable, and I can talk very well. So I was like, why not just do it? And we're here now, and I'm showing you a team about a Pokemon that threw a lot of people the wrong way. And I think for me, I'm that type of guy. I'm the type of guy you play against in badminton. I will be drop shotting you every single time you serve it to me, every time I return it to you. Because that's the kind of guy I am. And maybe that might rub people the wrong way, but that's just how I love playing the game. And I thought, what's the equivalent of doing that in this game? And I somehow made that happen. And I think that's the beauty of it. Play the game how you wish to play it. And if you can shoehorn that in with making it optimal, making it actually work, then that is even more rewarding when you see yourself win and become better. So if you did enjoy, like I said, share it with someone. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast overall. And this is Manny signing off. Thank you so much.